after a desperate search, she was finally located by a Catalina from Coastal Command. An attempt was then made to attack her with aircraft from the carrier Ark Royal, but unbelievably, in bad weather, it was directed against the cruiser Sheffield, who was now trying to shadow the Bismarck. Along with the Renown, these ships were from Force H, based at Gibraltar. One further attack was made in appalling weather conditions. Without doubt, this was the last chance available to stop her escape. Bismarck received a hit which wrecked her steering gear and jammed the rudders, and this was to seal her fate. Steaming helplessly in circles, the Bismarck was engaged the following morning by heavy units of the Home Fleet, being hit repeatedly by the battleships Rodney and King George V. Reducing the Bismarck to a flaming shambles, Rodney and King George V had to urgently retire due to an acute shortage of fuel, and her final destruction was left to the cruiser Dorsetshire, from which these film sequences were taken. "110 Bismarck survivors were landed in Scotland, and some 35 years later, they were invited to hold their annual reunion aboard HMS Belfast in London, which I myself was privileged to attend. It was an enormous relief to the Royal Navy that the Bismarck had been sunk, not least that the loss of the pride of the fleet, HMS Hood, had been avenged. Much publicity was to surround the fleet's arrival back at Scapa Flow.
Most of us had done plenty of practice attacks. This was the first chance we'd had of going out and having a crack at the Huns. And we were all very glad that we hit such a really good target. We in the Norfolk were very glad and very proud to be in the fray from start to finish, the only ship in the fleet to have done so. And further, that we were able to take a hand in her final destruction.
I sighted her on the port bow, and she immediately loosed off at us. My feelings were pretty mixed for a few seconds until I saw the bricks drop about 40 or 50 yards away from the ship's side. And I realized then that although we'd been Bismarcked, we were quite unmarked.
We was thumping salvo after salvo into her. You could see them hit. By the time we finished, we left her burning from stem to stern. One of her mags must have blown up, and she was sinking.
The First Lord of the Admiralty, A.V. Alexander, went aboard the Rodney to address her ship's company.
The destruction of the Bismarck, that great and powerful ship, had to be accomplished to the traditions of the British Royal Navy, because in the Navy, I know officers and men know how to avenge the loss of those who are comrades and many of whom have been shipmates.
3 cheers for the first floor of the Admiralty.